People once believed that when someone dies, a crow carries their soul. But sometimes, the crow can bring that soul back.
Is that gasoline I smell?
The Crow. Dark, haunting, gothic tale about a supernatural vigilante who is neither living nor dead, but brought back into the world of the living by a crow in order to avenge those who murdered him and his fiancée in order to end his eternal suffering. The night before his wedding, musician Eric Draven and his fiancée are brutally murdered by a violent gang, and due to the horrific and unfair nature of Eric's death, he comes back as the Crow in order to get revenge over what happened to him and stop the pain and suffering of his soul, where he is now seemingly immortal and full of vengeance to stop those behind his pain. The Crow is a fantasy superhero movie unlike any other, which has left a legacy for the saddest of reasons, in that during the making of the movie, actor Brandon Lee was accidentally shot in a freak movie set accident, and he sadly passed away as a result of it. And given the nature of The Crow and its life and death subject matter, it makes an already sad tale that bit more haunting. So today we are going to further explore the masterpiece that is The Crow, by exploring 10 things that you may not know about this mysterious but yet still relatable character. So let's not waste any time and look into the tragedy that is The Crow.
I wish the rain would stop just once.
Can't rain all the time.
Eric?
Number 10. The character was created out of real-life tragedy. Anyone who is familiar about The Crow would know that before the movie, The Crow started off as a series of comic books which began in 1989, written by artist James O'Barr, who created the character as a way of coping with the real-life tragic death of his fiancée. But not only that, what pushed O'Barr further into making his creation was when he learned about a real-life couple who were murdered over an engagement ring. Both incidents obviously lent a hand to The Crow's themes of dealing with the death of a soulmate and the unfair reality of love being destroyed by crime and violence. No wonder The Crow is full of raw emotion, what with all the real-life sadness it grew from. Number 9. The makeup of The Crow. One of the most iconic pieces of imagery associated with The Crow is the infamous and yet chilling face paint, which both makes the character look like a dark gothic hero of something other, and also clownish. Well, when the makeup artist originally applied the makeup on Brandon Lee, he wasn't happy with how it looked, as he felt it didn't look natural. So it was decided that the night before filming his scenes, Lee would apply the makeup on himself and sleep with the makeup on, giving his makeup a more worn out look for filming the next day. So that way his makeup doesn't exactly jump out at you and stand out, but is still visible, which I think definitely went with the movie's dark surroundings.
I see you have made your decision.
Also, I can't help but feel like Heath Ledger took inspiration from The Crow's makeup for his Joker makeup, as his makeup also looked washed up and worn out. Number 8. A movie without colour. Back when the movie was in its early days of production, the original vision of director Alex Proyas was for the movie to be shot in black and white, with only the flashback scenes being shot in colour, as he was keen to be faithful to the black and white imagery of the comic books. Although the idea is ambitious and an interesting one, it was probably a little too experimental for 1994, as the studio wanted the movie to be shot completely in colour. So instead, Proyas shot the film with mostly dark faded colours. Number 7. Completing the movie without Lee. Unfortunately, the movie was hardly finished when Lee's tragic and untimely death took place on the set. So in order to complete the scenes involving Draven and his afterlife alter ego The Crow, the movie's production had to be really ambitious, For example, certain scenes of The Crow were filmed using stunt doubles, with Lee's face digitally cut and pasted over the doubles' faces. And there were some scenes where we don't even see The Crow's face at all, thus once again using stunt doubles. And they did a pretty good job of completing Lee's performance from Beyond the Grave, as the first time watching this movie I never even noticed. So thankfully some imaginative trickery was able to complete the film. Number 6. Magic Crow. So after The Crow's release, we then got the sequels. Oh boy, did we get the sequels. Most people often agree that although some of the sequels had potential and interesting ideas, they were pretty terrible and just didn't live up to the magic of the original, proving that sometimes lightning really does only strike once. As we got The Crow City of Angels, The Crow Salvation, and finally The Crow Wicked Prayer, with each entry being a completely different tale with new cast members. However, one thing does seem to be consistent with the sequels. The actual Crow itself, Magic the Crow, who apparently was actually a raven, not only appeared in the original Crow, but he would also go on to star in all its subsequent sequels, making this feathered actor the only reoccurring cast member. Wow, I really don't know whether or not to be impressed or feel sorry for Magic the Crow, or Raven or whatever it is, for starring in some pretty awful movies. Even in recent years, there have been many talks about making a Crow remake, and right now it seems like the project is coming into effect. Sadly, given the lifespan of crows and ravens, I don't think Magic would still be around to star in the remake. But if by some sheer chance of miracle, Magic is still with us and up for reprising his role, I think it's time he got a pay rise. Number 5, there was a TV series. So we've already addressed the mediocre to downright awful sequels, but what some people may not know is that in 1998, during the Buffy hype, there was a TV version of The Crow, called The Crow Stairway to Heaven. Consisting of just one season, the Canadian TV show only lasted for 22 episodes before being cancelled, and basically just retells the story of the original movie, where once again musician Eric Draven comes back to life as the Crow after being brutally murdered by a gang. I can remember watching a couple of episodes back in the late 90s, and I felt like there was more of an emphasis on action and martial arts than there was on it being dark and dramatic like the movie was. Yeah, it basically swapped having a creepy atmosphere for having more fight scenes, which I personally think is a bit of a shame. I mean, just look at the promo poster where Draven looks ready to open up a can of whoop-ass. Isn't the Crow meant to be mysterious and tortured and hiding in the shadows? I don't know, to me this just isn't the Crow. And thus the show has fallen into obscurity, on the account that I don't know anyone who is aware of the show's existence. Number 4, changes from the comics. In the Crow movie, there are actually several changes made to the lore that is quite different from its comic book source material. For starters, in the comic book, there was more of a focus on Eric Draven being a heavy drug addict.
Mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children.
But the biggest change from transpiring comic book to movie is the Crow itself. As in the comics, the Crow was a representation of Eric's mind and turmoil, whereas in the movie it seems that Eric is aided by an actual crow, and that there is some kind of telepathic link between the mysterious bird and Draven, and that it's almost somehow guiding him. An idea that I actually think is a lot better than the Crow just being a psychological representation of Eric's mind. But that isn't the only difference between comic book and movie, as the movie had completely written out an entire character altogether, which brings us to the next point. Number 3. Missing character. In the later days of editing The Crow and to try and make up the scenes that Lee could no longer star in after his passing, one character was completely removed from the movie. That was the Skull Cowboy, who was a sort of guiding Obi-Wan Kenobi for Eric Draven. Originally penned from the comics, the Skull Cowboy approaches Draven when he comes back into the world of the living and gives him instructions he must follow. one of which being killing the gangsters that killed him. Director Alex Proyas removed the character because he felt the Skull Cowboy took the movie into a cheesier place, and instead the character was replaced by narration by the Sarah character, which fills us the viewer in with what's going on.
In many ways, I think it's a shame that the Skull Cowboy scenes were cut. I really do, as I think it would have added an interesting dynamic to the movie. That and the part was played by legendary actor Michael Berryman. But that said, the makeup does look like something from a straight up horror movie, so maybe it wouldn't have fit in with the cinematic Crow. But at the same time, I also feel like
I prefer the idea of Eric coming back into this world on his own, with him not knowing what's happening and having to discover his purpose by himself. It makes the experience more deep and meaningful and scary for the Eric character. Had the Skull Cowboy been in the movie to inform Eric what he has to do and explain to him what's going on, it actually may have come across that this whole thing was orchestrated by the Skull Cowboy himself, which would have made the Crow element redundant.
maybe it's just me, but I feel like The Crow should just be Eric's personal journey.
Number 2, The Crow video game. Oh yeah, you better believe it, but in 1997 The Crow entered the threshold of video game format, as Acclaim brought out a game based off, oddly enough, the second entry, The Crow City of Angels. Yep, the sequel no one liked.
Which is weird because, couldn't they have based it off the original? I mean, by 1997, the original was already a huge cult film.
Being released on the Sega Saturn and PlayStation 1, The Crow City of Angels' biggest problem can be summed up by the tagline on the cover: 3D fighting with a vengeance. As The Crow City of Angels video game is basically a mash buttons fighting game. But thanks to its frustrating and boring gameplay and difficult controller responses, this game was not a hit with gamers.
I have something to give you. I don't want it anymore. 30 hours of pain!
And just like the movie itself, has fallen into the eternal pit of forgetfulness. And also the colour scheme was putrid, but that's enough of that. Number 1. Actors considered to play the Crow. One of the most interesting aspects of doing these top 10 countdowns is learning about all the potential actors who could have played some of our most favourite and memorable characters, and the Crow is no exception to this phenomena. Brandon Lee was always the production's first choice to play the Crow, but there was hesitation on the account that Lee wasn't exactly a big name yet, so other possibilities were explored. Big names like River Phoenix, Christian Slater, and Johnny Depp were offered the role, but they all turned it down. At one stage it was considered giving the role to an actual musician, giving the rock star nature of the character Eric Draven. And thus Charlie Sexton was offered the role, but he too turned it down. Till finally the studio caved in, and the legendary Brandon Lee was cast in his standout performance, which sadly turned out to be his last.
Well, that was my look into one of the darkest action movies of all time, The Crow. The movie and its characters are a credit to storytelling, along with how we handle grieving, but most of all, it's also a credit to the performing talents of Brandon Lee, who I think would have had a wonderful career in his future. But, sadly, it never happened. To me, one of the most unnerving aspects of The Crow is that it's just as sad as tragic behind the scenes than it is on the screen. But at least Lee will forever live in the hearts of fans as The Crow. Anyway, I'm Minty, and when it comes to casting The Crow, no one could ever top Brandon Lee. See ya!